Nancy and I married 8 years ago, right after we finished college and secured good jobs. We immediately started saving for our dream home. I always wanted kids, but Nancy had no interest in becoming a mother, which created significant tension between us. Our relationship began in college, and while we were adventurous, we never ventured into anything extreme. Our intimate life was regular and fulfilling. We bonded over a shared passion for birdwatching during college. It was refreshing to have a partner who enjoyed outdoor adventures and discovering new bird species. We met on a birding hike and instantly connected. Our first intimate moment happened in the woods, which became Nancy's favorite spot. She preferred simple, practical clothing over fancy lingerie and always looked stunning with her shoulder-length brown hair and Mediterranean complexion. Her reluctance to have kids seemed partly driven by a fear of losing her looks. Recently, my work schedule became overwhelming, causing me to spend long hours at the office. Nancy would get home earlier, change, and go bird watching until sunset, meticulously logging every bird she saw. I often came home exhausted, falling asleep on the couch. I realized I wasn't being a good husband. I hoped Nancy would initiate intimacy, but she seemed relieved when I didn't make any moves, which troubled me. In my youth, I had a bad temper and often got into fights. By high school's end, I learned to control it. Nancy was unaware of this side of me, and my parents never mentioned it. To spend more time with her, I adjusted my workload and informed my boss, who understood. I needed to fix things with Nancy. Though I didn't suspect her of cheating, I knew she was unhappy with the lack of attention. "Nancy, do you think we need a vacation?" "No, I don't think so. Maybe a short one if you can manage." I was thinking a week or two, somewhere quiet and romantic. We haven't spent much time together lately. "David, I don't think either of us wants to be away from work that long. Let's stick to saving for the house. I know the house is important, but we need more time together. After work, I am too tired to do much, and weekends are full of chores. Darling, I am happy with a short trip nearby, but a full vacation is too much for me right now. Maybe I am just stressing too much. I want to make sure I am doing everything to keep you happy. I am happy, David. If things start going south, I'll tell you so we can fix them. We've got enough real problems without creating imaginary ones. I hope you're right. I don't want you looking elsewhere." She smirked at that, making my efforts to improve our marriage feel inadequate. I didn't mention my new work hours and made a weak attempt at intimacy that night, but she had a headache. Her bird-watching log showed frequent outings with rare sightings of her. I love my Honda 250 Rebel motorcycle. It is quick, quiet, and easy to handle, unlike those big, loud Harleys. It never gives me trouble. That day, I rode it to work. Nancy usually gets home around 4 p.m. Around that time, I told Laura, my secretary, that I'd be in the archives for the rest of the day and to call me on my cell when she was leaving. I left through the back fire exit, wedging the door open. 5 minutes later, I parked my Rebel down the street from home, hidden from view. Nancy came home at her usual time, changed quickly, and headed out for bird watching. I knew where she was going, so I followed at a distance. Her Volvo was at the Rainbow Mountain Trail parking area, with a black BMW nearby. I knew the trails well and took an alternate route, using my bird-watching skills to stay quiet and hidden. Near the mountaintop, the trails were rough and perfect for hawk watching. I paused to scan the valley with my binoculars, captivated by the view. That S when I heard giggling. The dense woods made it difficult to see, but I focused on the sound. I moved cautiously, listening intently. A flash of yellow caught my eye. It was the lining of her vest. I settled into a spot with a good view, using my spotting scope for a clearer image. Hidden and lying flat, I watched them. Nancy's companion was Stephen Connor, her colleague who had joined her company 6 months ago. I had met him a couple of times at work events. At first, Stephen seemed like a genuinely friendly guy. He had a pleasant wife who was somewhat reserved but charming in her own way, and 2 young boys in elementary school. I admired his family, and even hoped to have kids like his someday. But now my feelings toward him were changing rapidly. Why would a man with such a seemingly perfect family be interested in my wife? Stephen spread out a blanket while I watched from my hidden spot. Within minutes, Nancy had stripped off her jeans and underwear. Although they were too far for me to hear clearly, I could catch faint giggles and laughter. Nancy positioned herself provocatively, giving me a clear view. They started their intimate encounter, and I managed to snap a few incriminating photos. There was nothing romantic or loving about their actions, It was raw and animalistic. As the shock wore off, anger began to build inside me. Instead of rushing down in a fit of rage, I forced myself to endure it, unsure of what to do next. Stephen finished quickly, and after a few minutes on the blanket, Nancy performed oral sex on him. More laughter followed as they dressed. The whole encounter lasted less than an hour. Nancy kissed him on the cheek, more like a spouse than a lover, and they parted ways separately. She didn't notice me as I lay there, hidden. I quickly gathered my things and followed her at a safe distance. She didn't spot me as I kept enough space between us. I stopped at Hawk Mountain Overlook, a beautiful but risky spot. Scanning the valley with my binoculars, I saw Stephen walking down the path. Though seething inside, I remained outwardly calm. "What are you looking at?" Stephen asked, coming up behind me. "It's a red-tailed hawk feeding its babies at the top of that pine tree," I replied, pointing. He squinted but couldn't see anything. "Which tree?" "That one with all the pine cones," I gestured. "I still can spot it," he said, stepping closer to the edge. He turned to me and asked, "Have we met before?" "Yes, we have." "I am David Richards, Nancy's husband," I replied. His eyes widened in shock, and his last words were, "Oh crap," as I pushed him over the edge. Time seemed to slow as he fell, though it was only a few seconds. I looked down to see Stephen lying motionless, his leg twisted unnaturally. My phone rang, breaking the silence. "Hi, Laura, what's up?" I answered. "I am heading out now. Will you still be downstairs?" "No, I am almost done. I'll be back up in about 10 minutes. "All right, I left 2 letters on your desk for you to sign. They need to be sent out first thing tomorrow morning." "No problem. Thanks, Laura. See you tomorrow." It took me longer than expected to return to the office, but it didn't matter since Laura had already left. I signed one of the letters she left before heading home. I changed out of my hiking shoes into Oxfords, tossing the boots in a dumpster a few blocks away. Nancy was surprised to see me home early. They found Stephen's body the next day. It made the evening news, and Nancy was visibly upset. He didn't show up for work today. People were speculating if he was sick, but his wife mentioned he didn't come home yesterday. Why was he up on Rainbow Mountain? Was he into bird watching or something? Nancy hesitated. "I don't think so. Did you go up there after work yesterday?" She paused. "No. I wonder if anyone saw anything. It's usually quiet up there during the week." "Well, I suppose I should dig out the black suit." Nancy shot me a quick glare, clearly upset that I was being casual about Stephen's death. "Sorry, honey. I know you and Stephen work together. I didn't mean to make light of his passing." That night, I noticed her quietly crying after we went to bed, but I didn't say anything. 2 days later, a detective approached me at work. "Hi, I am Detective Mark Harris. Do you have a moment to answer some questions?" "Sure. What can I do for you?" "Did you know Stephen Connor?" "We worked at the same place, but we weren't close. Just met him at a few work events." "Is this about his accident on Rainbow Mountain?" "We're trying to wrap things up. Your wife and Mr. Connor were friends, and we want to ensure there is no issue there." "What relationship?" "They worked together. That's all. Your wife told us this morning she was with Stephen on Rainbow Mountain just before his accident." "That's not possible. She told me she was home doing laundry. It seems your wife has been seeing Stephen for over 3 months." "Hold on. Don to go making accusations about my wife. That's not right. I'm not accusing. Your wife shared this with us today. As for details, I can discuss those with you. That's something new you and your wife will have to figure out," said the detective. "Are you trying to make a point or just get me riled up?" "Relax, Mr. Richards. We're not trying to upset you. We talked to your secretary, Laura Bennett, earlier, and she mentioned you spent most of Tuesday afternoon in the basement sorting through archive files," he continued. "Not most of the afternoon. Just about 2 hours or less," I clarified. "I was in my office the rest of the time. I left early around 5:30 or 6. "The guard downstairs said you signed out around 4 to 6, the detective said. "Sounds about right. I wasn't keeping track of time. I just wanted to get home to my wife," I replied. "Your wife said you got home around 6. "It only takes about 10 minutes to get there," the detective said. "Did she mention I was there the rest of the evening?" I asked. "Relax, Mr. Richards. Everything's okay. We're just checking some details to make sure nothing is overlooked," the detective reassured me. "You really didn't know about your wife and Stephen's relationship, did you?" "No, but I'm sure it'll be a big topic at dinner tonight." Mark Harris gave me his card, excused himself, and left quietly. I was furious. I swear smoke was coming out of my ears. Of course, I knew what Detective Harris told me, but hearing it from someone else was maddening. I tossed my stapler across the room as Laura walked in. "David, I hope I didn't mess up." I nodded and replied, "Nah, you're good. I appreciate you answering their questions honestly. No problem, boss. I'm here if you need any more help." I then said, "Thanks. I might need a few days off." I was clear about one thing: I had no intention of fixing things with Nancy. I just wanted the divorce to be smooth. Luckily, we didn't have kids, and we rented our house, so there was less to untangle. Although I once yearned for children, now I was grateful Nancy had said no. It was barely 3:00 p.m., but I decided to pack up and leave work early. Laura understood. We had $775,000 in our house account, and I withdrew $63,000 before heading to the dealership down the street. 2 hours later, I drove off in a flashy yellow Hummer, $58,000 lighter. I figured a new house wasn't in the cards for me anymore. The Hummer was a gas guzzler, but at that moment, I couldn't care less. When Nancy saw the Hummer, she stormed out, furious. "What's that?" she yelled. "It's my new ride." "I needed something more exciting," I responded. "Are you insane? How will we afford it?" she demanded. "Relax, I paid cash," I said nonchalantly. "With what? Did you dip into our account?" she pressed on. "I didn't see the point in keeping the house since I'm a single guy now. So I got the Hummer instead," I explained. People around us started to take notice. Nancy grabbed my arm as we walked into the house. "What do you mean, single guy?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You know exactly what I mean," I retorted. "Why would I want a house with you? Why should I stay? Come on, David. You're talking nonsense," she said, trying to calm me down. "Just be reasonable and talk this out. Oh, and by the way, Detective Harris dropped by today. He told me all about your little escapade with Stephen Connor on Rainbow Mountain yesterday. Funny, you told me you were home doing laundry. Care to explain? I didn't want to upset you. Stephen and his wife were having issues, and he had no one else to talk to. I was just being a friend. Then why not meet at Denny S or Starbucks? Why Rainbow Mountain?" Stephen was emotional and didn't want to break down in public. I thought coffee would be less stressful. Nancy sat there silently waiting for my next move. It felt like she was toying with me, and it pissed me off. "It's all rubbish and you know it. You and Stephen have been sneaking around for over 3 months, betraying both me and his wife. I am sick of your childish lies. Either grow up or shut up. You have no idea what you're talking about. Just because you say something doesn't make it true. Stephen and I are just friends. If you have proof, show it." I was in a tough spot. I had pictures, solid evidence, but showing them would mean admitting I was on Rainbow Mountain when Stephen died, and I couldn't do that. I was sweating with anger, fists clenched. "I have some damning photos, Nancy. Would those be enough proof for you?" "Photos of what? Where?" "Pictures of you two getting cozy in a motel room," I said desperately. "You are lying," Nancy shot back, her face pale. She realized she had slipped up in her attempt to defend herself. Her eyes glared with hatred, her lips quivering. "You son of a witch, I'm done with this conversation. You're not divorcing me. You can sleep in that fancy truck of yours because you're not setting foot in my bed anytime soon. Maybe never. Fix your own dinner and leave me alone. Are we still going to the funeral tomorrow?" Forget it. The funeral was surreal because Stephen and his wife Megan weren't from around here. I couldn't understand why she chose to bury him here instead of their hometown. Maybe she was too distraught over his death to face their folks. Most of the attendees were from Nancy and Stephen S. office. After the service, people lined up to offer their condolences to Megan. When we approached, she sent her boys to a friend S' house. Nancy extended her hand, but Megan just stared her down. "You've got some nerve showing up here, you homewrecker. You ruined my marriage, tore apart my family, and now you have the audacity to be here. If I ever see you again, I will rip you apart. Count on it." Nancy was stunned into silence. She tried to say something but thought better of it and walked back to the car. Some people nearby heard the entire exchange. I glanced at Megan, who watched Nancy leave, seething with anger. "I'm sorry if she did anything to hurt you. I'm sure it wasn't intentional. Grow up. She cheated on you and you are defending her? What kind of man are you? Go comfort your cheating wife. I don't need your nonsense right now." I nodded slightly and headed back to the car. Nancy remained silent during the drive home, but once we were inside, she exploded. "You jerk! Why did you drag me to that funeral just to humiliate me? And don't tell me it's because your work buddies were there. Why did she single you out? Forget it. You were full of it, you big-mouthed jerk. She stormed inside, and I didn't hear a peep from her the rest of the day. I ended up sleeping in the spare room after that. I had no desire to be intimate with her anymore, so her decision was actually a relief. The next day around noon, I drove over to Megan S.'s place. I didn't know what to say, but I felt I should apologize. She was in the garage with her boys, sorting through some boxes. Hey, sorry to bother you, but I wanted to apologize for anything I might have done to upset you yesterday. She glanced at me but continued working. Eventually, she turned to me. Listen, I have a lot to deal with right now. I need to sort out the mess my husband left and figure out how to move on. I really don't have time for complaints. Can I help you with something? Are you serious? Yeah, I have some time, and I don't mind lending a hand. All right, grab some trash bags and follow me. We went into the house and up to the master bedroom. This is Stephen S.'s closet and dresser. Take everything out and put it in the bags. When you are done, take them to Goodwill. Can you handle that? Sure can. The boys joined in. Alex, Chris, this is Mr. Richards. Help him bag up your dad's stuff so we can get rid of it, okay? Both boys shook my hand. Alex looked about 8, and Chris seemed around 6. Those boys were the kind of kids I always dreamed of having. It didn't take long before the 3 of us were loading bags of clothes and shoes into the Hummer. After dropping off the bags downtown, I returned to Megan S.'s house. Megan met me at the door, looking both grateful and exhausted. You really don't need to do more, Mr. Richards. You shouldn't feel obligated because of what Nancy did. I asked, do you know what happened, or are you just guessing? A bit of both, she admitted, but I'd rather not discuss it in front of the boys. Can we talk later? Sure, I said. I'll come by tomorrow. I can help clear out the basement and garage if you want. She nodded. That sounds good, but I'll miss having the boys around. As I drove away, I felt a strange mix of relief and guilt. I couldn't shake off the feeling that Megan S.'s husband had it coming, and I suspected Megan felt the same. Nancy S.'s refusal to let go of our marriage was baffling. Why was she so resistant? When I got home, the house smelled like chili. I thought I might try to get Nancy to open up a bit before dinner. Nancy, given everything that happened, don't you think we should consider separating? I asked. No, not really, she said, not looking up from the stove. It's obvious you and Stephen were having an affair. You weren't happy with our arrangement, were you? I pressed. There's not much to say, David. Spending time with Stephen made me realize our visions for the future didn't match. You wanted a stay-at-home mom, but I wanted more. I didn't want to upset you by bringing it up. David faced a similar situation with Megan. She wanted what you wanted, and I wanted what David wanted. We ended up comforting each other, and things went further. He wasn't better, just different, she explained. Considering what you've said, wouldn't a divorce make sense? I asked, trying to keep calm. No way. I'm not giving up my home and comforts over a disagreement. I'm staying put. You can kick me out. I haven't done anything to warrant it. If you want to leave, we'll just have to live like roommates, I said. I'm not ready to give up, she shot back. Why not? What is stopping you? I demanded. I don't want to discuss it anymore. Let's drop it, she snapped. Dinner was silent. The chili was way too spicy, and soon after I started feeling queasy. After multiple trips to the bathroom, I began vomiting. Nancy, I am really sick. Can you take me to the emergency clinic? I begged. No way, Desperate Housewives is about to start. If your stomach hurts, take a Tums, she replied dismissively. It is more serious than that, Nancy. Please, I pleaded. Drive yourself. Stop being such a baby. I grabbed my keys and staggered to the car. My neighbor, who was taking out the trash, noticed and asked what was wrong. I explained, and he offered to drive me to the hospital. The next thing I knew, I woke up in a hospital bed with sunlight streaming in. I turned to see Detective Harris reading a magazine. Good afternoon, Mr. Richards. I thought you were going to sleep all day, he said. Why are you here? What happened? And what time is it? I asked, disoriented. Relax, I am the one asking questions. Take it easy, and things will come back to you, he replied. Sorry, I'm just a bit anxious, I muttered. Understandable. David, it seems you ate some bad chili last night. Your neighbor got you here just in time. They had to treat you for poisoning. It was rat poison, Detective Harris said. That woman! What did she say? I exclaimed. She gave us the leftover chili and it tested fine. She claims she has no idea where the poison came from. She ate the same food and was fine. We searched the house and garage but found nothing, he explained. So, what is the next step? I asked. Nothing for now, he said as the doctor and a nurse walked in. The doctor checked me over, and the nurse took another blood sample. He said I could go home when I felt ready and handed me a paper with bland food options. I borrowed Detective Harris's phone and called Megan to apologize for missing our meeting. Mark took his phone back. Why would your wife want to kill you, Mr. Richards? He asked. I'm not sure. Why did she kill Stephen Connor? Do you have proof? I replied. No, but she was on Rainbow Mountain with him, and she was the last person to see him alive. Come on, David, I'll drive you home, he offered. Nancy was surprisingly apologetic when we got back, expressing regret for not being more supportive. I went straight to the spare room and closed the door. I didn't feel like eating anything she cooked after that. The next day, I called Laura to tell her I'd be taking a sick day and asked if she could help me find an apartment. Somehow, she already knew what had happened. I waited until Nancy left for work, then began packing my things, preparing to move out quickly if necessary. It frustrated me that the police couldn't take any action against Nancy. After a quick breakfast at IHOP, I went to see Megan. The boys were at school. Megan seemed more upset about the situation than Nancy. I assured her I'd return later after dealing with some personal matters. Nancy didn't want a divorce, but she clearly wished me harm. That left me with two possibilities: revenge or money. I visited my insurance agent. It might have been a foolish move, but shortly after our marriage, I'd taken out $1 million life insurance policy with Nancy as the beneficiary. Although the premiums were high, the cash value had accumulated to over $166,000. I cashed it in. Then, I canceled the collision and comprehensive coverage on Nancy's Volvo. At work, I terminated the medical and dental coverage I had on Nancy through the company. While the medical insurance would remain active for 90 days, the dental coverage would end by the month's close. Additionally, I changed the beneficiary on my company insurance policies to my mother. Laura greeted me warmly and offered her assistance in any way she could. The bank manager informed me that Nancy had already emptied out the remainder of the house fund, totaling around $112,000. After explaining the situation, he agreed to prepare everything for closing the credit cards and checking account as soon as I gave the go-ahead. I opened a new account and completed the necessary paperwork. Later, I swung by the house. Nancy was there, dressed in her bird-watching outfit. We exchanged pleasantries but kept it cordial, not overly friendly. She mentioned she was heading up to Rainbow Mountain for some bird-watching and relaxation. It felt like a setup, but I went along with it anyway. After she left, I jumped on my Rebel motorcycle and took off. I spotted her car in the upper lot next to a gray Ford Ranger. I rode around the mountain to the lower lot and saw her mountain bike chained to a tree. I hid my Honda in some bushes, dreading the uphill hike. It only took a few minutes to reach the top. From behind a rock outcropping, I watched Nancy talk to a man holding a peculiar tool. She handed him a photo and an envelope. He looked at the picture, then opened the envelope and counted a hefty stack of cash. They shook hands, and Nancy quickly walked toward my direction. I ducked behind a ledge and waited until she passed. The man stayed hidden behind the rocks, watching the trail. He was clearly waiting for something, and I had a hunch what it was. Nancy expected me to follow her, assuming I'd approach from the lot where she left her car. I took the downhill path, which was quicker. At the bottom, her bike was gone. I took my Honda and rode back to the upper lot. The Ford was unlocked, and I found a jogging outfit on the front seat. I grabbed the registration from the glove box, a pack of matches from the console, and the jogging pants. Twisting the pants tightly, I soaked them in my Honda's gas tank. After drenching both ends, I stuffed the pants into the truck's gas tank, lit the end, and hurried away. Halfway down the mountain, I heard the explosion. I hoped she paid him enough to clean up that mess. I broke a few traffic laws on my way home, taking back roads to avoid Nancy. After parking the motorcycle behind the garage, I grabbed the lawn fertilizer spreader and started pushing it back and forth across the lawn. It was empty, but Nancy didn't know that. A few minutes later, my wife drove up and spotted me. She looked disappointed. Before she could speak, I jumped in. "Hey, where's the Volvo? You left in the car and came back on the bike. What is going on?" She stammered. Then her phone rang. Turning away to answer, I couldn't hear the conversation, but whoever was on the line sounded excited. David, I left the Volvo up on the mountain and biked home for exercise. I know it sounds silly, but can you give me a lift back up to get the car? Honey, that doesn't make any sense. Come on, I'll drive you up there. She was silent during the drive, fidgeting with her fingers. She seemed really worried. As we neared the mountain road, we saw several fire trucks heading up. A police officer stopped us halfway. I am sorry, folks, but there's been an accident at the top of the mountain. A truck caught fire. We can let anyone up there right now. My wife's car is parked up there. Can we walk up to get it? Wait a moment. We waited as he talked on his phone. All right, you can hike up, and an officer will help you past the fire trucks to bring it down. Dante, wait for me, she said, stepping out of the Hummer. You can head home. I'll be fine. Thanks for the ride. I nodded and watched her go. Once she was out of sight, I followed. The chaos made it easy to keep an eye on her. When she reached the top, the man she met on the trail approached her, gesturing wildly. I couldn't hear them, but it was clear she was trying to calm him down. They argued for about 10 minutes before he spoke to the fire chief. As they got into the Volvo, I hurried back to the Hummer. Maneuvering around the fire trucks would slow them down, but I needed to move fast. As I drove off, I saw the Volvo turning the corner. Back home, I quickly took off on the Honda. I visited Megan and apologized for being late. She wanted to know what happened, so I gave her a watered-down version of the story. Alex and Chris were thrilled to see me and ordered pizza for dinner. We spent a few hours clearing out the basement for a yard sale. The boys worked hard without complaining, and I wish they were my own. Around 9, Megan drove me back home, and I left the motorcycle at her place. Nancy returned late, but I didn't ask where she had been. The next morning, while Nancy showered, I took out the SIM card from her phone. After she left for work, I instructed the banker to close our accounts and credit cards. I canceled her phone service, paying a $200 fee. By the end of the day, the landline, DSL, and cable TV would be disconnected. I informed the landlord of my sudden move out and let him keep the deposits as compensation. I told him my wife might continue staying there, so he should contact her about a new rental agreement. The water and electricity would be shut off by the end of the week. It didn't take long to load my stuff into the Hummer, and soon I was headed to the new apartment. Laura had left a note saying Detective Harris wanted me to call him. I went to the station and found his office. Well, look who's still kicking, Mr. Richards. What do you mean by that? Mark Harris chuckled, amused by my situation. Do you know a guy named Adam Foster? I can honestly say I have never met him. I handed him the Ford S registration. He glanced at it and remarked, quite intriguing, mimicking a poor impression of Charlie Chan. We shared a laugh. Mr. Terrell and your wife have been talking on the phone a lot lately. She called him 6 times and he called her 4 times in the past week. Also, your wife withdrew $12,000 from a savings account 3 days ago. Adam Terrell is a known convict with violent tendencies. We have been monitoring him, and this connection caught our attention. Any reason your wife might want you out of the picture, Mr. Richards? There was until I canceled a $1 million life insurance policy yesterday morning. Does she know you canceled it? I doubt it. Adam is skilled at his job, and I am impressed with how you handled the situation. He has likely already been paid, but without his truck, who knows if he'll go through with it. I wanted to warn you that we've had a talk with him. I made it clear that if anything happens to you, he's going to be our first suspect. He wasn't too happy about the extra scrutiny. We also suggested he lay low for a while. Not sure if that'll be enough to stop your wife, though. I've moved out. I don't know what else I can do, I said, feeling defeated. Mark leaned back, studying me. I have a feeling you're not telling me everything, David. The pieces don't quite add up. Just keep your guard up. Leaving Mark's office, I headed straight to Megan's place. She was up for lunch, and I was glad she liked sushi. I tried to give her an idea of what was happening without being too specific. There was so much I wanted to tell her but couldn't. She gave me a few puzzled looks, and instead of explaining, I changed the subject. Lunch dragged on, but she easily convinced me to come over for dinner. I apologized for being so scattered, and she just laughed it off. I felt at ease with her. The next morning, I felt ready to get back to work. The previous night with Alex and Chris was a blast, and I was looking forward to the weekend with Megan. Oddly enough, I didn't miss Nancy at all. In fact, I was relieved not to have to deal with her anymore. As I got into the Hummer, I felt a sense of optimism. Things were finally looking up. The drive started smoothly, but as I began descending the first hill, I realized something was wrong. The brakes weren't working. I always thought drivers in movies were stupid for not stopping the car. But now I understood. I tried to turn off the key, but it wouldn't budge because it was in gear. You need to be in park to turn the key off. The Hummer kept accelerating. I calmly shifted from drive to low, causing a jolt, but it continued to pick up speed. I was hurtling toward traffic and intersections. On the left was a cemetery with a grassy slope rising from the street. I aimed for it and yanked the handbrake. The Hummer spun 180 degrees and flipped over as it hit the slope. Darkness enveloped me. For the second time in a month, I found myself waking up in a hospital room. I moaned, sensing a flurry of activity around me. A nurse quickly checked me over, and the pain was intense. I appreciated the attention but wished everyone would just leave me alone. It was all so confusing. Finally, a doctor arrived, and I struggled to open my eyes. Amid the white coats, I saw Megan at the end of the bed. Her presence was comforting. After some checks and adjustments, exhaustion took over, and I drifted off again. When I woke up next, the room was quiet. I opened my eyes slowly and saw Megan asleep in a chair beside the bed. My whole body ached. "Hey, are you awake?" I whispered. She looked up and smiled, joking that she was dreaming. She thanked me for being there. "No problem," I said, closing my eyes and slipping back into sleep. In the morning, I felt a bit more alert but still in pain. The room was full of medical staff, but Megan wasn't there, which surprised me. The doctors bombarded me with questions about my pain and vision, but I had plenty of my own. I asked about Nancy, who had come to the hospital to sign admission forms but hadn't been seen since. I had been unconscious for 2 days. Megan visited daily, and Detective Harris checked on me regularly. I had a concussion, a broken collarbone, a broken left arm, and 3 broken ribs. Thankfully, nothing was life-threatening. The doctors were most concerned about my 2-day unconsciousness. I was starving and finally got some soup. Mark showed up later. "I thought you were keeping an eye on things," I said. "Sorry, we didn't see this coming. Any idea what happened?" "Someone cut the brake lines on the Hummer and disabled the airbags. I went through the windshield, and the seatbelt broke 3 ribs as I was thrown out. Luckily, there wasn't a fire, but the Hummer S totaled. Honestly, I never liked it much anyway." "Speaking of Nancy, any idea where she is?" "She signed the hospital forms, but I haven't seen her since before the accident. I tried calling her, but her phone's not working. She wasn't happy about the situation." After finishing the paperwork, a cop escorted her home. "I asked if she wanted to see you, but she said it wasn't necessary. So you've seen her more recently than I have." "Did she leave town?" "We checked the house. Her purse was there with about $8,000 in cash. She left behind her driver's license, credit cards, and personal stuff. It doesn't seem like she'd leave town without taking anything. We think she's just missing. Any clue how the Hummer got sabotaged?" We were clueless. "Adam Foster?" "Nope. Believe it or not, Adam Foster was in a hospital in Philly. A couple of guys took him there and made it clear they didn't want anything bad happening to you." "Anyone you know in Philly, David?" "Damn, Mark, I don't know anyone in Philly." "Really, I have no idea who you were talking about. I believe you. Gotta go now. If you need anything, just ask. How about a guard at the door?" We chuckled a bit as Mark left. Megan walked in. "Hey, the doc said you can leave tomorrow if you've got somewhere to go. I told him you'd be staying with me. I got instructions on how to care for you, and a visiting nurse will come by daily. The doc will see you in a week." "All right, sounds good to me. Who's going to give me my sponge baths?" "You or the visiting nurse, your call. At least both my legs work. I can use the bathroom on my own and sit up to eat at the table like normal." The pain meds made me queasy, so I tried to stop taking them soon. Megan and the boys were great company. I enjoyed my recovery. We stayed indoors the first week. Then I had her drive me by the old house. The landlord was there, wondering about renting it out since Nancy was missing. We sorted out a plan to clear out our stuff. Laura visited me at Megan's place. She had been going to the hospital daily and had gotten to know Megan. They got along well. As I prepared to return to work, I planned to stay with Megan and the boys a bit longer. My recovery went smoothly. I continued living with Megan and the boys. After about 3 months, our relationship turned from friendship to romance. I moved into the master bedroom without much fuss. Alex and Chris seemed to think it was natural. We started going out together and attending social events. I even began attending PTA meetings. The only issue was that I was still legally married to Nancy. I kept in touch with Mark regularly, but there were no updates. Eventually, I decided to ask the court to declare Nancy legally deceased so I could marry Megan. I took her to a cozy Italian restaurant. After enjoying a nice bottle of wine and a delicious meal, I was ready. Megan, I know it hasn't been very long for either of us, but I truly believe I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Would you consider marrying me? Is that a hypothetical question, or are you proposing? I am proposing. Will you marry me? Yes, but there's one small hitch. What is that? You need to meet my family in Philadelphia.